Okay, welcome back to Roll Mangging for my primer on Godbound, part 4. Hopefully the last part, as I think this should be enough information for some people. But we finished with all the words, going over all the divine powers and gifts and things like that. So we're gonna move on. But first, last thing with words, just because I learned this apparently. This is from the author himself. So this is confirmed possible. But with fertility, with birth blessing, where you can instantly render a target sterile, induce miscarriage, or bless the target with the assurance of a healthy conception, which you can shape in the child's details. That is not limited to just human females. It has no limitations whatsoever. So yes, you can make men pregnant. You can have a Arnold Schwarzenegger Jr. situation if you want. How exactly that plays out, I guess that's up to your DM. You can make, animals pregnant, of course. But according to him, you can also make, rocks pregnant if you want. And you can decide what the rock child will be like when it gives birth. You could make trees, you can make anything that's anything. You can make anything pregnant. It's wild. It's absolutely, this is confirmed. This is canon. I don't know. I want it. I'm going to do it. I just want to make everything. I want to just bless the entire. I want to make the planet pregnant. That's my goal. I'm going to make the planet pregnant. That's my goal. So that's fun. The other thing I noticed when I was talking about the bow, with the None Beyond Reach, where you can shoot if you know something's location within 10 feet, as long as it's on the same realm. You can shoot at it, but that doesn't mean it's going to hit. And so that's kind of what this the green box here goes into, is using that ability along with a few others. Basically, this guy learned the precise location of this guy's bed, and he shot an arrow at the time of when this guy was sleeping, and he used inexorable shaft here. Your projectiles can penetrate any thickness of non-magical materials in order to pierce the cover that shields the target. So even though it's not like the arrow just appears next to the guy, the arrow comes from your bow. I don't know really how it works if you're shooting at something on the other side of a planet, if it'll go across planet. But either way, if you're planning to do these insane, ridiculous snipes with None Beyond Reach, you're probably going to want Inexorable Shaft. Otherwise, you can only really hit stuff that's out in the open with a clear path. Anyways, that really has nothing to do with anything. But okay, so alright, so let's go back to Care Gen. So you've rolled your attributes. You figure out the modifiers for your attributes. So modifiers range from -3 if your attribute score is 3, 4 to 5, -2, 6 to 8, -1, 9 to 12 is 0, 13 and 15 +1, 16 and 17 +2, and 18 is +3. But if you use the might thing to get a 19 strength, it's a +4. You've got your 3 facts for your origin. You've got your 3 words, possibly a 4th word if you want to go that route. You pick your gifts, 6 points spread around your gifts, 1 point for lesser gifts, 2 points for a greater gift. And that's where you can spend 3 points to bond another word. You've got your saving throws, hardiness, which is based on strength or con, whichever's higher, evasion based on dex or int, whichever's higher, spirit based on wisdom or charisma, whichever is higher. And then you pick your weapons and armor. So armor, pretty simple. It's not a very complicated system. Basically, your base AC for a person is 9, modified by your dex mod. So it can never be worse than 9. So if you're really bad dexterity with like a -3 modifier, you're just an oaf. You still have a 9 AC. But if you have a positive dex mod, that improves your AC. And armor improves your AC as well. So if you wear light armor, leather armor, stuff like that, you have a base AC of 7. Medium is 5. Heavy is 3. But if you wear medium armor, you take a -4 penalty to 1 saving throw roll of your choice. So hardiness, evasion, or spirit just takes a continual -4 modifier as long as you're wearing armor. And then heavy armor is -4 to 2 separate saving throws. And then if you have a shield, if you're wearing a shield, you just get a -1 bonus to your AC in addition to any other stuff. So your dex mod does affect your armor no matter what. So whether you're wearing heavy armor or you have one of those powers that changes your base AC to 3, your dex mod still comes into play. So people with 18 dex generally can be pretty hard to hit if they want to be, because the way that the combat rolls work is to hit something. Let me just find. Okay. So when you're trying to hit something, you're going to roll 1d20. You're adding your attack bonus, which is, unless otherwise specified, it's going to be whatever your level is. So at level 1, you have +1. Level 3, you have +3, so on and so forth. So it starts level 1, you're adding 1d20 plus 1. You also add a modifier for an attribute. So most melee weapons are using strength. Ranged weapons are using dex. There's a chart here. Unarmed is strength or dex. Light weapons, strength, dex, so on and so forth. So you're adding that modifier or subtracting it if you have a shit one. And then finally, you're adding... I know it sounds like a lot. It's probably just in my explanation. It sounds like a lot, but it's really not, because these numbers rarely change. Your attack bonus, again, it's just your level. Generally, like it will change when you level up generally, but that's about it. And your modifiers will very rarely change. There isn't much that changes your attributes as you level up. So these numbers are pretty static. You write them down once, and that's just how it is. The final thing you add then to determine if you hit is the target's armor class. So this is why having a lower armor class makes you harder to hit, because your armor is basically a bonus to the enemy's roll. So if I want to hit something, I roll my d20, say I get a 16. I add my +1 for being level 1. I'll add my strength mod, say that's +2. So we're at 19, I think. And then we add, say, the Peasant's armor class, which we'll say is 9. So we're at 28. As long as you roll, your total roll is 20 or more, you hit. That's pretty much it. So hitting, something with 9 AC is generally pretty easy. Because even, with a neutral mod at level 1, you have like a 50% chance of hitting something. If you roll a 1, it's always a miss. If you roll 20, it's always a hit. And so the target number is always 20. And your attack bonus is going to go up with every level. I don't know if enemies get into, like, negative AC. I don't think so. We'll look at the Bestiary in a second, but I don't think so. So, again, I don't know how this really plays out throughout the game as you level up, but yeah, the number you're always trying to hit is 20. So then you'll roll damage, also adding your modifier to the damage. Some games do that, some games don't, but in this game you do add your mod for both the attack roll and the damage roll. So I guess it's like D&D, I think. And then unless you're rolling damage straight, which is an uncommon thing, that does not normally happen. Unless you're doing that, you're rolling damage against this table, which we discussed last time. So the most damage you're going to do with any one die, assuming you roll 10 or more, is 4. So even if I roll a d12 and I add, you know, my +4 mod for strength and I get a 12, so I get like 16 total damage against a peasant or whatever. Peasant is always the example. Even if I get 16, unless I'm rolling straight, the most I can do is 4 points of damage, which is enough to kill most mortal little dudes, most humans. And additionally, we went over the multi-dice thing last time, so I won't repeat that. Fray die is generally 1d8. That's the thing that you can use every round against lesser foes, is just free damage. Apparently, there are some gifts that increase your Fray die. I don't know if I saw any, but it's possible. He says it is. And attribute modifiers don't apply to that. It's just your 1d8 free every time. And that's only useful against lesser foes. I talked about morale. We don't really have to talk about that. Godbound that are brought to 0 hit points are gravely wounded and helpless and die from further harm. So if you take any damage, any at all, even 1, while you're at 0 hit points, you are dead with seemingly no way to resurrect. But if you're just left there for dead, you will always regen 1 hit point, unless some wolf comes by and eats you. But that's a real bullshit DM. I'd be a little pissed at that. Alright, so then Divine Fury. This is a fun one. This is basically like Spartan Rage from God of War. So if you're brought down to 0 hit points, instead of just saying, oh, I'm dead, you can choose to enter a Divine Fury. You immediately gain hit points equal to half your maximum, rounded up, and you gain bonus effort equal to your level. So you get some extra little effort to spend, which is always fun. You're immediately freed from any magical effect that is binding or constraining them, whether mental or physical, and for the duration, you cannot be controlled or bound by magic. Maximum duration of the Fury is equal to your level in rounds, and at the end of that time, you become utterly helpless for 5 rounds. All gifts become inactive, you can take no action, and you automatically fail all saves. You can be killed automatically by a single attack. If you go back to 0 hit points during or immediately after a Divine Fury, you die instantly and cannot be revived. It says their spirit is too weakened by their exertions to be restored. So there must be some way to recover them. I'm just not exactly sure where it is. Once you've done this and you survive, you have to gain a level before you can do it again, which makes sense. And NPC Godbound normally cannot enter a Divine Fury as they've already expended theirs during some past moment of crisis. Okay, that just makes it easier. So a full day of recuperation in a safe, reasonably comfortable place will restore all HP for a Godbound. You regain all committed effort each morning, whether or not they've had the opportunity to rest. But you do have the option of leaving effort committed if you have something if you have one of those effects that's like everlasting, or it's like it lasts whatever the word is, as long as you keep it maintained, you can choose to just keep it going. Yeah, there's not much else. I mean, a lot of this is sort of basic RPG stuff that I don't really want to go into. Talking about defeating foes non-lethally and like you know about that. You know about that. Play some RPGs. So generally, by default, on your turn you have one action and one movement. So you can move up to your full movement rate, and you can do one action. There are ways, of course, to get multiple actions and things like that. I think the default movement rate is 30 feet per round. So you can, by default, level 1, you can move 30 feet each round and do one action, which is either, an attack or using a gift. Anything else that the DM determines is an action. So it's very simple. There's nothing much to it. There's no initiative at all. So basically, every round, all of the player characters go first in whatever order they choose. Then all the NPCs go. And then back to the players, back to the NPCs, so on and so forth. It's very simple. Like I said, this is kind of why I was a little surprised, because I thought OSR was just so annoying and complicated, but they really make things a lot more simple. So this is just a quick rule reference that you'll want to print out, and yeah. All right, so right, I think that's about that. So then there's magic. There's two different types of magic. There's lesser magic or low magic, and then there's high Theor G, or theurgic magic. High magic. So low magic, a hero can use low magic if they have a fact related to their mastery of a tradition. And so if you have in your backstory, or if at some point in the game throughout the plot you become associated with one of these academies or schools or traditions of low magic, you are capable of doing any sort of effect associated with it. So it's not like there's no list of spells, because this is generally this is not how you're going to accomplish a lot of things. It doesn't need to be compartmentalized, and it doesn't need to be covered in rules and all sorts of things like that. So if you were in your backstory that you could say you're an archmage, you were an archmage of the Academy of Thought. Like, it doesn't matter if you were an archmage, because you're a step above that now. It's just part of your backstory. Like, it's like, okay, fine. That's who you were. So even if you were just studying at the Academy of Thought, once you become a Godbound, you have total mastery over that school. So as long as you have a fact related to one of these, you can do all the magical effects associated with it. So, they're listed out in different, like, apprentice, adept, master, archmage for NPCs. So you can come across a master of the Academy of Thought, and he can do, just these first three categories, but he can't do the archmage stuff. But for a Godbound, all of this is just lesser stuff that doesn't matter. So you can do everything. So, unless specified, magic is generally like a ritualistic kind of thing. You have to have like paraphernalia and charms, tokens, and chemical, all sorts of stuff related to the ritual. Apprentice spells require 15 minutes of work. Adept is an hour. Master level spells need 4 hours, and arch magic is an all-day process. And any of these are ruined by interruption or damage, with the spell fizzling uselessly. So you can see, you know, with being a Godbound and having deific powers and, you know, being able to build castles from, you know, the air, stuff like that, spending all day doing some low magic ritual is not going to happen too often. Um, so low magic capabilities can't affect anything outside of your presence, at most out to your maximum line of sight. They don't last longer than the next sunrise. Consequences can linger, and they can't create permanent matter. Also, they're unable to directly overpower or overcome gifts because they're just magic. It's not deific powers. So yeah, if you wanted to be an Academy of Thought just as an apprentice, you could understand the speaker of a foreign language, have a brief mental conversation with a willing target in sight, so basic telepathy. As an adept, you can project your emotions to a subject, create a mental link of communication, trick a target into seeing or hearing something illusory. As a master, you can control a target's emotions fully within their usual range of passions, compel a target to obey for a scene in a non-harmful way, and plant a suggestion. As an archmage, you can inflict 2d6 physical damage dice on a target. Compel a target to obey for a scene in a non-suicidal way, or for a day in any not especially objectionable way. Or deeply probe into even forgotten memories on a particular topic. So, you know, in just like a D&D type game, if I was playing like, you know, Artemis or something, I wanted to be a Scion, it'd be like, oh yeah, a bunch of these things are really cool is what I want to do, yeah. But in Godbound, it's like, what is this crap? You know, it's like, you know, there are, you've clearly seen all the abilities. These are just really watered down, like weak mortal versions of those things. So I just don't see many Godbounds utilizing that much magic. But it does allow for some more flexibility. You know, if you are playing a god of sword and might and death or something like that, you might want an occasion to sometimes control a target's emotions fully, just by casting a master spell. But apparently for Academy of Thought, you can cast spells like instantly. But it comes at a price. Each spell cast spontaneously applies a cumulative -1 penalty to all hit rolls, attribute checks, and saving throws. So you can rest for half an hour. Or you can take 1d6 damage die of injury. Yeah, so, I mean, I'm not going to go through all the spells because they're just not that interesting compared to the Godbound gifts. But, like, the Cinnabar Order deals with flames, so you can become immune to mundane flames as a ritual, you know, that's like, okay. Extinguish flames. You can hurl fireball. You can use fireball, yeah. Become immune to even magical flames. You can summon an 8 hit dice Cinnabar Conflagration, which to a Godbound, 8 hit dice is not really a big problem. But hey, you know, if you're just wanting to mess up some tavern or something, sure. Yeah, I mean, normally magic gets me really excited, but it just so pales in comparison to the gifts. So yeah, we won't spend too much time here. But then you get to Theor G. So this is the high magic. This is only accessible by Godbound or other really supernatural entities. And archmages can also wield some high Theor G, but that's a pretty select few of mortals that are allowed access to it. This is not your average magic. And for a Godbound to use it, they have to know the gifts of the sorcery word. So, It's pretty specific related to them. But there's a lot of cool ones in here, but it's here. While Theor G is far more powerful than low magic, it is still no match for divine gifts. Still not quite up there. Theor G may be dispelled as mortal magic is dispelled, and it cannot banish the workings of gifts unless otherwise specifically mentioned. So yeah, it's cool. There's a lot cooler stuff here. And if you're going into if you want to be like a big spellcaster, you're going to pick the Word of Sorcery, and this is what you're going to be looking at. So here we have all the invocations. So the Gate is the weakest form of Theor G, then the Way, then the Throne. Again, I could just go through and read all of these, but Barred Gates of Forbiddance. By means of arcane connection, you may forbid a subject from entering a particular place. As small as a particular room or as large as a nation. You can ban somebody from entering a nation. You need not be present inside the area to be warded when casting it, but you have to know its location and general dimensions. Worthy foes get to make a spirit saving throw to resist the forbiddance. So yeah, using that, you can prevent potentially a Godbound from entering a place. But if they have a way of dispelling something, or if they just make their spirits throw, even by, using effort, they can automatically, if they want in, they're gonna get fucking in. That's the end of it. But, if you want to keep other people out, go ahead. This one, this requires that you sing, forbidding other speech or spellcasting while it's maintained, and as long as you're singing, those around them are unable to acknowledge your presence, or the presence of allies who remain close to the Theurge. Observers are aware of the sorcerer, but they can do nothing to act on the awareness unless the invocation is ended. So it's not like they don't see you walking into the castle or, whatever. And they can hear you sing, but they literally just cannot act on it. And again, worthy foes. The worthy foe with the best saving throw in the group may roll a spirit save to resist. If successful, no worthy foe is affected. That's probably going to be true for a lot of things. It's just, worthy foes, Godbound, things like that, get a save. That's about it. Excision of Days. You can steal life from a person to prolong the life of the caster. This sends like a blade. The blade leaps in the air and pursues the target, traveling at a rate of 100 miles an hour to unerringly seek its victim. Then strikes for 1d6 damage per hit die of the Theurge caster. It's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Like, no matter what, it's going to hit. That's not bad. That's a good way to assassinate. Open the Night Road. We'll get to Night Road in a little bit. Pour of Hell. 1d6 damage. Blah, blah, blah. I mean, obviously there's a lot to read here. I don't want to go into too much of it. This murderous incantation requires an arcane connection with the victim. When completed, the target must immediately make a hardiness save or perish in some gory and spectacular way of the caster's choice. Yeah, so it's like a death note, really. Even those who succeed in the saving throw suffer a 1d10 damage die per hit die of the level of the caster. That's pretty good. Lesser foes get no saving throw at all. If you want to, this power exists in the world. There are archmages that have it. And so, if somebody wants a king dead in this continent, they're probably going to be fucking dead. It's just crazy stuff, some of the stuff they got. And they are still no comparison to a god. Yeah. You can read all of this stuff yourself if you're really interested. Look at that. You can call up automatons from clay, stone, wood, metal, or whatever other inanimate material the caster has convenient. You can make shit. You can make shit automatons. Nice. They're intelligent. Yeah, so there's some summons and cool stuff like that. All right. So moving on to the default world here. Arsum. I'm going to call it Arkham. I think that's cool. So here you have it. It's a very vertically oriented world. It's kind of like Westeros. I mean, I assume there's other continents and stuff, but okay, this is enough. So I haven't done a detailed reading on the default world because I didn't really need to yet. But yeah, there's a lot of text in this book, man. This guy has just gone nuts with creating this world. So we have the realm itself, the world itself. Then you have heaven, you have hell, and then you have the sort of void that's everywhere else, and that's called the uncreated night. And so the uncreated night is sort of like it's kind of like the Dark Tower, I guess, where you have, I don't even know what it's called. I've already forgotten. But it's like the space between worlds and stuff like that where, you know, these unimaginable horrors exist. And so that's what fills up the uncreated night in the void, is all these horrific, uncreated. They are twisted proto-things living detritus vomited up by the night. Possibly manifestations of friction between the created world and uncreated night. So yeah, that's where you get all your eldritch abominations and, you know, every horrible, fantastical thing that you can imagine comes from the uncreated night. And there are the night roads. Whoops. The night roads are the only way to cross through the uncreated night. Because there's a lot of realms out there. You know, there's other planets and there's other dimensions and things like that. And they're all connected through these night roads. But, you know, it's sort of a dangerous place. Because they're not all in perfect condition and things bleed through. And so a lot of times night roads can be like basically portals open to the uncreated night, and so you have these abominations coming through, you have parasite gods coming through, all sorts of nasty stuff. So it's not, I don't think you're going to be like floating around in the uncreated night. It's just sort of this trouble that's always there. But that's cool. Anything with eldritch abominations is always cool. Then you have heaven, which has seen better days. That whole war sort of stirred up a lot of trouble up there, and God is missing. But there are angels up there. There's a bunch of different angels up there, and angels are pretty dangerous. It's not a foe to be taken lightly. But yeah, I sort of picture it like in Diablo 3, you know, when you go up to heaven and shit's kind of hit the fan, it's like falling apart, and it just doesn't seem like a happy, wondrous place. But you can sort of see the remnants of that. That's kind of how I picture heaven in this setting. Yeah, it's a very sort of shattered place. It's all kind of floating around. Then you have hell, which, yeah, I mean, it's hell. You can picture it. Not a whole lot to say. He doesn't have a lot to say about hell. I mean, it's possible you might go to hell. There could be some cool adventures there. And then there's these paradises, these small realms. And so there's empty paradises that you can find. There's like corrupted paradises, and you as like players can eventually even like make your own paradise, I guess, if you want. So you can sort of make your own heaven, which is cool. But yeah, he's got all this information on each of the regions of the continent, the different islands and stuff like that. And he also talks about the far realms. That's where all your alien shit comes from, which is basically Dungeons and Dragons far realms. But it's cool because you can make a player character. Your player character can be literally anything. Like, by default, it seems like everything is implied to be human. But you could be a dwarf, you can be an elf, you could be a kobold, you can be a dragon. It even mentions that. You can, like, it talks about if your players want to be a dragon, or if they want to be a lich. Like, just, you fucking let them be a lich, because it doesn't really matter. There's no real difference, I mean, that's where you sort of get into the narrative thing, I guess. I mean, if you want to be a dragon, you still have you build it the same way, you have the same stats, I guess. You have the same gifts. You just have to contend with the fact that we're all playing humans and you're a dragon. But, yeah, you know, if you want to be a dwarf, be a freaking dwarf. Anyway, so, yeah, I'm not going to go through all of this. Really, the best thing here is the, he talks about, like, climate and trade and religion. Obviously, religion is a pretty important part of the whole setting, because you're playing as gods. So there's all sorts of faiths and wars, but here, this is the player's guide to the realm, which just has, like, one paragraph for each region. So that's a pretty nice one to read. Yeah. So Uncalia, he's actually made, like, a whole separate book for, which is pretty cool. Basically, like, this massive outbreak of night roads opened in the country. So it was like an Oblivion crisis just in this region. And so all these just abominations and shit came out and just fucked up everything. And so now people are, like, living on the coasts and on little islands. And it's just a shit show. Which is perfect for some, you know, crazy Godbound just bounce in and deal with it. So that would be an exciting place to visit. But, yeah, then there's the whole DMing section, which is not very interesting. I don't really need to talk about that. It tells you how you should run Godbound. I'm not going to go into that, because if you're planning to run Godbound, you better just read it. Then we have the Bestiary. So, it's not, there's not, like, just this laundry list of stat blocks and things like that. I mean, there are stat blocks, but there's really not that many enemies here. You have angels. Very dangerous stuff. So Angelic Guardian, this is the least of angels, the weakest of angels. So you have a 3 AC. Okay, so that's pretty good. They have a 60-foot movement of flight. They have 10 hit dice. Means you have to do 10 hit dice. In this game is basically just HP. The reason why he does it as hit dice is so that you can easily transfer over monsters from other OSR games. Because hit dice is sort of just the universal thing. So there aren't really many enemies that deal with HP. Like, a peasant has 1 hit dice. From how I understand this. Generally, hit dice is HP. So for attack, they get a +10 bonus to their attack rolls, and they get to attack 3 times for every action. So they may take 2 actions per round. So if you do the math, if they really want to, they can hit 6 times per turn at +10 each time. And they do 1d8 damage straight. 1d8 straight 3 times twice around. That means if you're showing up at level 1 with 8 HP, you're fucking chunks from the weakest of angels. They have a morale of 11, which means they will only flee or whatever on a 12. And they have 3 effort, which they can spend to automatically succeed on saving throws, or they also have the words of sword, bow, or endurance, which means they can do miracles for any of the sword, bow, or endurance gifts. So they could just become, you know, immune to damage for a round, or do max damage for an attack, you know, whatever they want. So yeah, that's there you go. That might give you a better understanding of some of the threats out there. It's like, yeah, you can blow up all the fucking peasants and bandits you want. You can go hog wild, but when you're ready to step up your game, you better be ready. So then they always have this tactics section with a D6 that has all the things that they might do in combat, which is helpful. They can fly to a better position, invoke a miracle for invincible defense against weapons until the start of its next turn, and then attack. Invoke a miracle to automatically hit on all attacks made this round. So these are handy so you don't have to look up like all the gifts for sword, bow, or endurance and decide, you know, which one is you going to use. You don't have to be that particular. You can just look at this and see what it's most likely to do. Then you move on to the Ravager, which has 1 AC, 15 hit dice. Like, you'll notice, like, yeah, 3 attacks, 1d8 weapons straight. Like, that's really painful, but he only has 10 hit dice. Which means, you know, if you want it dead, and you have, like, you know, some decent combat potential, it's not that hard to kill an Angelic Guardian. You know, 10 hit dice is not that many. Especially when you look over here at the Angelic Tyrant with 50 hit dice. That's a little bit trickier to take down. He can move to any location in sight. He saves on a 3 or higher. His attack is 2 automatic hit. He doesn't even have to roll to hit you. He's just, yeah, he hits you twice. He gets 3 actions per round. So if he wants to, he can automatically hit you 6 times per round for 1d12 straight damage. This is absurd. This is absurd. And he has 15 effort, which means he can just spam miracles until you're all dead. So yeah, that's the toughest of angels. That's pretty cool. Eldritch. So these are not like Cthulhu or anything. These are your like dark mage. These are like your supreme cultists and things like that. These are your theurgic masters. So they have all the Theor G magic. They are treated as possessing the word of sorcery. You're meant to pick 2 or 3 theurgic invocations of each level they know to represent those arts they have at their immediate disposal. So some of these are meant to be like mortals, but others are like the lesser Eldritch, I think, is mostly consists of mortals. But then you get to like the Lich Lords, the Court Wizards to Emperors, and then finally you get like Arcane Hermits living in heaven. So yeah, he's probably pretty powerful. And so yeah, even though these are like lesser Eldritch, even though they're mortals, these are just like High Priests and Court Wizards and stuff. They have 16 hit dice. So that's not a joke. 16 hit dice is more than, you know, these types of angels. So that's pretty good. And they do 1d10 straight damage twice per attack, 2 actions per turn. Like, even at level 1, this is a decent foe. 1d10 straight damage, that can easily kill you. Straight damage is very serious, especially early on. So, yeah, you might be demigods, you might be capable of these divine gifts that surpass anything mortals are capable of, but you're also fresh off the boat. Whereas these people have been fucking kicking around for a long time. And they can kill you. So, you're not just like, I am God, I smashed the planet, and you're dead. It's not quite that level of power. Give me a second. Okay. Alright, so then we move on to some real threats. Not those basic bitches. We got made gods. So these are basically the deific figures from, like, the original big climactic wars. These are like the original Godbound, pretty much. From 1,000 years ago. So the ones that are still kicking around are serious business, as this picture here represents. You don't want to mess with that guy. I don't care how much of a badass level 1 Godbound you are. He'll fuck your shit up. Let's look, shall we? So this is just a generic made god. He has an AC of 0, which means you don't get to add anything to your roll. He can move 120 feet per round, however he wants to. His hit dice is 50. That's quite a bit. You're probably not going to be killing this guy in one turn. He always succeeds on a save. Always. Always. You cannot do anything to him that requires a saving throw. Doesn't matter. He gets 2 automatic hits per attack. Pretty good. And he gets 3 actions per turn, so he can fuck you up. His damage is a blast that does 2d10 straight damage. So that's average of like 10 straight damage per attack. And he doesn't have to roll for the attack. He gets 2 attacks per hit. 3, I mean, he sees you and you're all just fucking dead. It's insane. Defeating a made god is almost impossible without careful preparation. Yeah, this is an ambush kind of situation. Just impressive stuff. Look at this. This is the target a single foe and hammer it with everything the gods got. Good lord. Good lord. So yeah, those are not, that's maybe at level 10. Like, that's like, okay, let's try and take out a made god to finish this campaign or something. Okay. Misbegotten. So, these are sort of your abominations that have been changed and corrupted by sorcery or some sort of curse, things like that. There's a lot of stuff that falls into this category. And these, like, minor misbegotten, these could easily be like level 1 threat that you might deal with. So AC somewhere between 7 and 9, which is almost nothing. That's no problem. Hit dice 1 to 5. I mean, you can be clearing swaths of these. These would probably count as lesser foes, I think. Their attack, they get plus hit dice, so plus 1 to 5. Damage 1d6. That's not even straight. We've been dealing with only straight damage, but that's just 1d6 damage. So they could easily hit you for nothing. They do get 1 effort, but they don't have any words. So I think they can only use that effort really for, like, to save on a saving throw. Yeah, so That's basically your fodder. And it even says that minor enemies is mob fodder. So nothing too bad there. But then you get into the more major stuff. So these are your big bad, threatening a whole region kind of thing. A Titanic Beast with 2 AC, 15 hit dice, plus 10 mod for 3 attacks per attack, 1d10 straight damage, 5 effort. They can overwhelm any ordinary mortal foe and can even threaten a pantheon of novice Godbound. So yeah. But that's fun stuff. You get all sorts of cool enemies like that. That's pretty much it. They talk about mobs. Mobs can be pretty much anything. Mobs is basically just a number of individual enemies that have been grouped together. So a mob can be small, large, or vast. Small mob is enough to fill a large room. Large mob can block a street. And a vast mob is the size of a military unit on a battlefield. You really don't have to worry about exact numbers. It's just not a big deal. So a small mob has hit dice equal to 10 plus twice the creature's base hit dice. So a small mob of 1 hit dice soldiers, just human soldiers, would have 12 hit dice. And so it doesn't really matter how many are in that small mob. I mean, you can make up a number for the players, but it really doesn't matter. Because when you're dealing with mobs, you're dealing with sort of AoE situations, and you're just picking them off and whatever. You might take out 2 per turn. You're just chipping away at the hit dice for the mob. That's pretty much it. Because when you have a vast mob, you have a whole military unit on a battlefield. You're not counting out the individual ones. You just have this big pool of hit dice and stuff. And so there's rules for mob combat, and some of them have special abilities. And so basically it's just meant to simplify, because you're going to have a lot of situations, most likely, where there's a big group that's trying to take out your few Godbound player characters. And so you're not going person by person by person and having them each roll. It's just one big attack. So mobs can make 1 full round of attacks against any foes within reach each round. So a single mob pitted against 4 Godbound heroes can attack each of the 4 heroes every round. If a vast mob has 6 attacks per round, then every foe within its reach will be attacked 6 times every round. So this is how, a group of bandits or something like that, a group of soldiers, could take down a Godbound. They never could do it individually, of course, but just the sheer number of them continually pelting away, assuming the Godbound is not continually just immune, or something like that. It's possible they can get in enough hits and just drag you down. Now, the thing is, though, they are susceptible to area effect powers. So when you do an AoE attack, you get to roll your damage straight, which obviously is a lot better. If you have a small mob of 1 hit dice soldiers with 12 hit dice, if you don't do your damage straight and you do an AoE of like 1d8, the most that you could do is like 2 points of damage, which would only kill 2 of them. But if you do an AoE with straight damage, as all AoEs are against mobs, and you roll a 1d8, you could do 8, and that would take them down to 4 hit dice, and probably the rest would just flee at that point. So AoE attacks with straight damage makes them very useful against mobs. Which makes a lot of sense. So they give some example mobs. You have the Furious Peasants. So a small mob of these would have just 9 AC, 12 hit dice. They get no bonus to their attack. They each get to make 1 attack. Like, this is not a threat. This is literally just like, well, what's a mob of peasants look like? Well, there you go. Really easy stuff. And you get your fray die So you can just wipe them out. But then you have, Undead Hordes that step it up a little bit. Trained Soldiers, you can clearly see the difference. Definitely improvement over Peasants. Elite Warriors, King's Guard, stuff like that. You could definitely see an improvement. Here you have for like Warbots or Battle Golems and stuff. Definitely a bit of a threat. So, yeah, I mean, the point is, at level 1, you're probably not taking out kingdoms. Not just straight on, kick in the door kind of thing. So, yeah. Then we have all the mortal foes. You have common stuff, as we've sort of just talked about. You have civilians, peasants, warriors, veterans, even a veteran human. Like, he's been in the military his whole life. He only has 2 hit dice. So, it's really just nothing. He might land a hit on you, and he might even do a point of damage to you, but, well, that's not counting the weapon. So with the weapon, yeah, he probably could do a point of damage if he hits you. But yeah, most of the time, ordinary humans are of little consequence. Their job is to slow down a hero. That's pretty much it. There's not much to say about common humans. But then you have the exceptional humans. So this is pretty much where you get, like, adventurers. You'd get player characters from, like, Dungeons and Dragons. That's what this is sort of representing. So these are a little bit more intimidating. You have 4 AC for a minor hero, 4 hit dice, which still isn't big, obviously. Plus 6 attack, 1d10 plus 2 damage. But, if you are a Godbound that is not combat focused, you've picked stuff that doesn't really help you in combat that much, doesn't give you 3 AC, or doesn't give you invulnerabilities, or, whatever. You're not meant to be in combat, and you're caught by yourself, or you're caught unaware, or something like that. You're, like, ambushed by a minor hero, and you don't roll that well, and maybe he does. Yeah, it's possible for a minor hero to take you down. They get 3 effort, and they're allowed to pick a word, or they're allowed to pick a gift. So they get 1 gift, likely from sword, bow, or endurance. So yeah, they could use their effort to get a gift that gives them max damage for an attack, or lets them automatically hit for an attack. So it's possible. It's possible. It's kind of exciting. Then you have major heroes, which is a step up from that. They get 2 attacks per attack with plus 10, 1d8 plus 5 damage. They get 4 effort, and they get 3 gifts. Usually 1 offensive, 1 defensive, and 1 that has something to do with movement or manipulation of the environment. And they get 2 actions per round. So yeah, definitely level 1 if you're not combat focused, and potentially even if you are, if you're not careful, it's very possible for a major hero to take you out. And, if you're causing trouble, you're making the ruckus, these might get sent after you, or they might just come on their own and be like, this is a villain. This is a big, bad, evil guy. I'm going to take him out. Skilled mage. So they are obviously a little bit different. They get sort of some more sort of spell type gifts, Theor G, things like that. Also potentially a problem. Then you have animals. Yeah, some of them potentially could eat a Godbound. You get attacked by a lion or something. It could happen, and it could be bad. It's possible. A predator king. What the fuck is a predator king? The heroes of the animal world, grizzled beasts of terrible wrath. They may act twice around and have 2 pertinent gifts. They are divine. Yeah, so Predator King could fuck your shit up at level 1. Watch out. Parasite gods. So these are cool. These are basically like some sort of creature or person or something like that that has been corrupted by this energy that's sort of siphoning off into the world. And so this energy is basically feeding them, and they are like they are sustained by it, and it's like this celestial power. It's sort of like the same thing that's powering Godbound, but it's just sort of leaking through rather than focused, like it is with Godbound. So they're definitely like just monstrous and threats to a region, and they end up like cursing the entire region with just bleh bleh. So there are all sorts of just more nasty, horrific stuff. And so you have these even the weakest of Parasite Gods, 3 AC, 15 hit dice, 2 attacks, 1d8 straight damage. That's again a big threat to level 1. Shit. Well, it's likely strong enough to overcome a novice Godbound. A full Pantheon should be sufficient to kill it or drive it into hiding. So yeah, level 1 or 2, having them go up against a weak Parasite God could definitely be a fun time. Because there's likely to be all sorts of other fucked up things in there. If your players are looking for just sort of the traditional go into a dungeon and stomp on some evil shit, this is probably what you're looking at. But, it can come in a lot different forms as well. And later on you get to the Dread God, the most powerful things with, you get it at this point. And it gives a sample one that's all fleshed out with backstory and different abilities, and yeah. So that looks to be just a weak god. It's intended to be a fair match for a party of 4 first level Godbound. So if you're just looking for something to throw together, there you go. Relics. Yeah, these are sort of just leftovers of the past 1,000 years and of heaven shattering and stuff like that. Or the artificial life from the previous utopia. There's some weak stuff in here. There's some powerful stuff in here. Oh, you have the shapeshifters. So this is a shape-shifting assassin. Could be pretty tough, man. That would be an exciting session, dealing with a shape-shifting assassin that can do 1d8 straight damage twice per attack at plus 10. Like, that's a threat to a lot of things. And, this is some sort of unscrutable, thing that's just continually adopting different forms and just killing things. It doesn't age. It's pretty scary. That's cool. You have spirits, ghosts, banshees, wraiths, elementals, all sorts of stuff like that. And it doesn't go into specifics. It just has minor, major, mighty. And it's up to you to flavor it however you want, which is a pretty simple and easy way to do it, rather than having the old school bestiary that would list every single individual enemy. A lot of these just fall under the same category. You don't have to do too much. We've got summoned things, elementals, drones, blah blah blah. The uncreated. So these are your abominations from the void. So these are some of the coolest stuff. And these things have the ability to absorb and suppress divine power. Yeah. So this is very cool. They can commit effort to negate a gift or miracle. And they can also have the cold breath ability, where you have to spend an amount of effort before you can spend effort in any other way. So as long as you're in their presence, you have to spend like from 1 to 5 points of effort before you can do anything else related to effort. And you don't get that effort back until like you leave the thing's presence or you kill it. So it's like a big effort tax just to fight them, which is cool. And yeah, there's definitely some terrifying stuff in here, as you'd imagine. Straight damage and multiple attacks and low AC. Undead, you have the Draugr, Dried Lords, and stuff like that. Like Uncalian Husks, one-hit dice. Like, these are your very basic zombies, and a Godbound should be able to deal with them pretty easily. But, a whole army of undead coming at a level 1 guy, yeah, it could be a problem for some Godbound. But again, it's not, the game is not about just what can I beat up and how much can I beat up. The game is meant to be a little bit more involved than that, a little bit more complicated than that. And then he has rules for creating other enemies, and there's also rules for creating new words and new gifts and stuff. He goes into treasure. He discusses wealth. There's different artifacts. Magical artifacts. And players, of course, can create artifacts, divine artifacts, and sorts of cool stuff like that. So the last thing that I need to talk about is changing the world. So change. That's a big part of being a demigod in a corrupted, broken world is being able to change it in some way. So there are a few different ways that players can change stuff. You have gifts, so you can use your gift. To go back to the whole castle thing, you can use like a gift of earth to make a castle. That's it. Like, you just do the action or maybe spend some effort, whatever. You make the castle, right? Pretty simple. The second way is you have influence. So this is sort of a currency that is committed, like effort. And generally you have influence equal to 1 plus your character level. So you start with 2 influence generally. You might be able to get some more. And influence is sort of it's sort of an off-screen thing. Generally, influence is always done off-screen. So you might say, if there's a castle there, you might say, I'm spending influence to maintain this castle and maintain the villagers' control of the castle. Because if you don't watch over it, you give a castle to some villagers and you just leave, you go away. The bandits are going to come in, they'll take over the castle, the emperor is going to come in and say, this is my castle, and he might take it over, blah, blah, blah. And that might be the end of it. You gave him a castle, but it didn't fucking do much because you weren't around to really watch over it. Or you didn't set it up in a way that was any sort of permanence. So you might spend some influence to say that I'm continually watching over this castle. And so this involves all sorts of off-screen stuff, of you making sure that they are still in control of it, of you telling the bandits and the emperor and stuff like that, or whatever, however you want to style it, whatever. As long as influence is committed to this situation, it's going to stay as you want it because of off-screen, out-of-game, whatever, off-screen activities that your Godbound is doing. He's tending to it, but you don't have to micromanage everything. You don't have to actually do stuff in-game with your time, because that's what influence is doing. Okay, but you can also have influence do, like, you can have influence do stuff. Like, you can have it, like, build stuff, construct stuff. Like, say, say a tsunami or something wipes out a town. You can spend influence to rebuild the town. You can commit it to rebuild the town or something like that. But the thing is with influence, it's generally pretty a temporary thing. Like, once influence is removed, once you no longer commit influence to a situation, the natural pressures and complications of the situation will soon erode away whatever alteration they made. New industries might fall apart under outside pressure or lack of direction, while obedient governments might turn rebellious as unfettered new officials rise in power. This usually takes a while, but it's almost inevitable once influence is withdrawn. So influence is generally seen as a temporary measure. And so you can commit it to different things, and it's maintained and things are done while you have influence committed, but it's still temporary. Because things naturally change over time. That's just how it happens. If you're not attending to it, that's just how it is. So that's where Dominion comes in. Dominion is fucking the biggest divine power you really have. Like, with Dominion, you can change potentially anything in reality. With enough Dominion points, you can change anything, no matter how impossible or improbable. You can fucking cut off. You can just annihilate half the continent with enough Dominion, if that's what you so choose. But the problem is really getting up that many points. And so you're going to get Dominion points. I think it's like anytime you like complete a session, or you complete some sort of major goal or something like that, the DM gives you Dominion points. And you have to spend a certain amount of Dominion points in order to level up. Like, even if you have enough XP, you cannot level up until you've spent your Dominion. So you can't really hoard it that much if you want to level up, which generally you do. So Dominion doesn't generally, you're not hoarding it in the hundreds or anything like that. You're generally spending it continually to make changes because that's interesting. But also, as you build a cult up, like every in-game month, you're going to get Dominion from them and stuff like that. So Dominion is the most powerful means of altering a fact. Utterly impossible changes and wholly magical alterations can be performed by spending Dominion and invoking a suitable word. Though the most drastic changes will require some heroic deed to be accomplished to clear the way for the new fact. So, yeah, I mean, you can't literally just snap your fingers and wipe out half the continent or something like that. There's going to be some adventure involved, just, because we're playing an RPG. But a Godbound of health who wanted to maintain a village's health in perpetuity could spend Dominion to banish sickness entirely from the boundary of the village forever after. The locals would simply never grow sick again. Like that Dominion is just divine power in its most glorious form. The only way for someone to undo that change, where this village is permanently free of sickness, is to spend more Dominion than you did. That is the only way. No magic, no gifts, nothing like that could ever induce sickness in that village. And so, Dominion is generally not fast. It might take a few weeks to take effect or something like that. Again, it's not just an instantaneous thing, but it is generally very permanent. But here's the real issue, is the cost. So, like, completing a session gets you, like, 1 Dominion, and completing a major goal gets you 1 more Dominion. So stuff like that. So Dominion, it's not like this huge currency. You're only going to have a few points of it. But to affect an area the size of a village costs 1 Dominion by default. City is 2, region is 4, nation is 8. The whole realm, the whole world is 16 points by default. Now, this is multiplied based on what you're trying to accomplish and how implausible it is. If it's something that doesn't violate the laws of nature or really piss off anybody, it's just a ×1 multiplier. So nothing too big. But if it's implausible, if you're bending the rules of nature, or if somebody is really disagreeing with this, convincing a lord to take a course of action will probably bring him harm, stuff like that, ×2 multiplier. Then you have extraordinary changes, politically unthinkable or physically impossible. This is ×4 multiplier. Convincing a lord to undertake a suicidal crusade, establishing a new magical industry that produces something impossibly advanced. So yeah, you could set up like a factory that makes clones in a D&D setting if you wanted. Like, that's just okay, done. But you have to have a certain dominion in order to do it. And players can pool together their dominion. So you can pool together to do something cool, which is nice. Then there's the really crazy impossible stuff. And that's where you have to do like adventures and stuff to find the necessary components, persuade reluctant locals, lore, or something like that. And there's also like powerful enemies can actually resist this. And that increases the base cost. So, like a minor parasite god, if you're trying to change something that would affect him and he doesn't like it, he has a resistance of 6. As do fresh Godbound, by the way. So resistance 6. You'd add that to the base cost. So if you're trying to change something major in a village, which normally has a cost of 1, but there's a minor parasite god there, that bumps it up to 7. 6 plus 1. And if you're making an improbable change with a multiplier of 2, you're looking at 14 dominion, which is absurd just to affect a village. So likely you're going to deal with the minor parasite god first. But yeah, so powerful forces can make things more difficult. But yeah, spending dominion is very much a core part of the game. Being able to change the world around you in a very notable, divine, powerful way. You have to do it if you want to level up. So players are going to be finding all sorts of different ways to spend dominion, and it's really completely free form. There's very little restrictions. There's very little restrictions on what it can do because it's divine power. Like, this is the highest limit of what Godbound can do. So it's pretty cool. So, but it has to be related to your words. So that is definitely a restriction for each Godbound. But like I said, you can pool them together, so you can give them all to the Godbound of whatever to do something. So you could, if you're a Godbound of the Sword, you could turn all the peasants of a simple farming village into crack warriors. That's a very weird phrase, crack warriors. That's got to be a rap group or something. I don't know. That same village might be able to build a magnificent castle under the guidance of a Godbound of Artifice. It's within the scope of human capability. Yeah, so that's really cool. I can't wait to dive into that. And overall, I can't wait to dive into Godbound in general. We've talked about this quite a bit. It's a very fascinating game. There's just a lot of just cool elements to it. It doesn't seem like your regular traditional fantasy sort of game. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I really like Shadow the Demon Lord. I really like Dungeon World for your just like go-to fantasy game. I of course I've played a commoner in D&D. I like being low powered and just struggling and using your wits to overcome these normal situations. But there's definitely something appealing about being like a demigod, being this super powerful figure that can just brush away an army. It's a very different flavor. So I'm looking forward to running it, and I'm looking forward to playing it, which shouldn't be too far off. But I've certainly done enough talking now on Godbound, so I'll leave you with that. I don't know, who knows what next RPG I'll discover that I really am interested in. But for right now, flavor of the month is Godbound, a game of divine heroes by Kevin Crawford. My name is Mang, and I'll see you fine folks around.